So, the story here starts 109 years ago, but I'm going to tell it quickly so. And that's with a treaty between Canada and the United States. In 1909, there was tension along the border. In the West, there was tension about who got the water, limited amount of water, and there was the farmers there were digging their own canals and had pitchforks and almost guns, and that wasn't good. And in the East, the argument was primarily about the Niagara Falls. People in Canada wanted to put much more of the water through penstocks for hydropower, and in the U.S. wanted it natural for tourism. So rather than just try and settle these issues, the two countries got together. At that time, Canada was represented by the King, Great Britain, and a treaty was signed. That treaty established the International Joint Commission, and it has 3 Americans appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate, and 3 Canadians appointed at the highest levels of their government. What we do and what we can't do. What we can do and are charged with doing under the treaty, under the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909, is to put orders, as we say, we put the orders on the dams. There's a number of dams shared by the United States and Canada. So where water flows across an international or along an international boundary, such as the St. Lawrence Seaway, and there's a dam. The flow of that water is, of course, important to many interests: hydropower, the environment, people who live along the waters. All of those interests have to be represented, and represented fairly in both countries. The IJC sets those orders, but the governments have to approve them. On all other matters, which is to say the matters relating to pollution and water quality, we are only advisory. We don't permit, we don't offer permits, we don't regulate, we can't arrest anybody. We advise the governments. If you look back over the 109-year history, like everything else, sometimes we write a report and give advice, and we've all been ignored, right? When we've given advice. But sometimes our voices have been heard, and they've been heard in very important ways. We, for instance, the IJC, our predecessors, in the 60s, the late 60s, offered the advice to the governments on how to address some of the major problems facing the Great Lakes, which were then a mess. That report resulted in the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement is why we're here tonight. In '72, Nixon and Trudeau, 2 people who really didn't have a lot in common and didn't like each other a whole lot, the first Prime Minister Trudeau, signed the agreement. And that has been refreshed and renewed several times, and in 2012 it was so again. And under that Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, the 6 commissioners, 3 Americans, there's actually 1 vacancy now, so there's 2 Americans and 3 Canadians, we are charged with writing a triennial report. At the end of 3 years, which is where we are now, we write a report, and the report has several elements. One of the elements says, take a look at what the governments have promised under this water quality agreement. And they've promised a lot in terms of keeping the water safe and clean, fresh and whole. Take a look at that, look at what the government's own report card is, and tell us what you think is an outside independent assessment agency, which is what the IJC is. In addition, the government's going to write another report, which we've yet to see, and that's more science. We can talk about that if questions arise. But also, write your own report. Tell us how you think we're doing in living up to the promises we made under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement of 2012. That's why you've come tonight. We are here to listen to you, to ask you what you think about, if you've read any of the government's reports, we want to know what you think. If you've read our draft report, we want to know what you think. If you haven't read any of those reports, but you have an informed or concerned about the Great Lakes, we want to know what you think. We will assemble this, pass it along to the governments. Some of it will influence what we write ourselves in our final report. And if we're lucky, your wisdom will become government policy.
Growing up in Rondeau Bay, or spending summers with my grandparents in Rondeau Bay, Canada. So I have a huge personal appreciation of the Great Lakes and what others have said about appreciating the beauty and fishing and boating and recreation. So just a personal relationship with the water, as most of us have. And I'd like to say to the IJC that the collaboration and cooperation that they have through this body, the Great Lakes Commission, is extraordinary and appreciated. It's a cooperation that's impressive during a time when we have such political divisiveness. And they are, I think, a model for many others to emulate, especially in Washington, D.C. So your desire and ability to work together on common goals is key to the success, and again, is appreciated. Thank you for all that you do, and particularly for supporting and encouraging research and science, like the gentleman just mentioned. We need to must have science-based decision making, and I know that that's prevalent in the work that you do, and thank you for that. An idea I'd like to share is that the research be made more accessible to the public, meaning not just making it available on a web page, but I work with a lot of residents in Detroit. Some of the work we do around green infrastructure to address stormwater management and nutrient runoff.
And then I looked at the pot of water that had been boiling, and I went to the bottom of it and got this, which are all the solids that separated in the boiling process. And I'm willing to give these to somebody. I don't really want to hold on to them, but they're a case sample of what happens when we're faced with how do you make this work.
What was the source of your water?
Detroit tap.
Ooh.
I live near Hamilton and Webb.
West side.
It really is in the middle. It's right up just south of Highland Park. So, we're right here in the middle of the city. And no, we don't have reliable water, and it's also priced too high. We have some of the highest priced water, and we're surrounded by water. Places that don't have water near them pay less than we do. And we're being charged for runoff off of our lots now.
Right.
And the churches are winding up having to pay for this too. But what I also wanted to mention here is back in 2012, Marathon started processing tar sands. And when they started processing tar sands, they started creating something called petroleum coke. Petroleum coke is a fuel substance that's dirtier than coal when it burns. It's about 50% higher in hydrocarbon releases into our atmosphere. The problem is that petroleum coke was being stored in the shadow of the Ambassador Bridge without a permit. And I want to applaud you for actually bringing activists with We the People of Detroit and allowing the activists we're leading the way in some of these efforts. And I really hope that you understand these people, many of them aren't being paid. The only contribution, it's your contributions that we allow us to do printing. It doesn't put any food on our table at all. So I want you to know that what our efforts are doing is revealing what's not right. And I realize a lot of people want to talk about how, they're paid. It's like, I don't know who's paying. But these are all issues. I really want to say that water is such a dear, dear source. I've worked with We the People and part of the People's Water Board Coalition. I've worked on the the Flint water scandal Facebook page that continues to push out article after article every day about what's wrong with water across the country and focus on Flint's ongoing situation that was caused through emergency management and the removal of people from oversight by not having elected officials in charge of what's going on. This is actually a violation of the United Nations human rights, that we have the ability to select the governance that we're under. And so when we start talking about human rights violations, we're here, we live in it, it's here.
Thanks, Mr. Boyd.
The Alliance to Halt Fermi 3, nonprofit organization operating primarily what we'd like to call the 50-mile radiation zone around Fermi in Monroe. And we are primarily working to stop the construction of the proposed third nuclear reactor out at the Fermi site, equally dedicated to the shutdown of the existing Fermi 2, and probably sort of our long-range vision, of course, is to call for a more responsible energy policy that emphasizes safe, clean, renewable energy here in Michigan and, in this Great Lake Basin. One thing that we signed on to a little over a year ago, and I haven't really heard anything from the IJC, but there were over 100 groups that a year ago called for a designation of radionuclides as a Great Lakes, quote, chemical of mutual concern. I was really pleased to hear Alana, start off this evening by saying that the IJC is a science-based organization. Well, the part of the big problem in this case is that radionuclides are just not even on the map. So it's, we have to recognize radionuclides as a chemical of mutual concern before we can even, find the money to do the studies that would begin to indicate, to decision makers and policymakers and lawmakers what potential problems might actually be causing, bioaccumulative kind of an effect here in the Great Lakes Basin. There are, many nuclear power plants, mining, milling, processing operations, more than, I think there's more than 30 generating stations, processing facilities, waste disposal, uranium mining, milling sites scattered around the basin here. And of course, because we have not been able to identify a repository for high-level nuclear wastes, all of these pile up on site in the various reactor sites around the basin. So you have, what we like to say, we built the mansion, we forgot to put in the toilet. Now, I don't know about you, but, if I were in charge of the building code, I'd have a serious problem with that,
And I want to endorse a lot of barking because what I want to address here as quickly as I can needs it. My name is Vic Max. I'm a member of Alliance to Halt Fermi 3, Michigan Stop the Nuclear Bombs Campaign, and Peace Action in Michigan. And I'm active across reactors, weapons, and waste, and collaborate and study the work of other people around the country and into Canada. Radionuclides should be identified as substance of concern and monitored and measured systematically on a continuous basis with real-time measurements and assessments of impacts on humans, and all of that should be provided to the public. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission does not do that, and of course we understand the International Joint Commission doesn't do that, but they could highlight the fact that it isn't being done. In 1997, IJC's Nuclear Task Force carried out an in-depth study to assess the adequacy of monitoring radionuclides in the Great Lakes. They concluded that there was no uniformity in measurement of radionuclides, and that were being done. It was left to users of radionuclide materials to do this. Very little of the monitoring activities are designed to address or are capable of considering the movement and cycling of radionuclides throughout the ecosystems. This is a conclusion of IJC in 1997. Both NRC and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and IJC leave the issue to users of radionuclide materials and licensed specified releases, which are computer-generated numbers, not real-time measurements publicly disclosed. Furthermore, the NRC has refused to study the effects on people living within 50 miles of a reactor. So what we have is measure nothing, study nothing, preserves the capacity to say nothing happened. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has stated, quote, public and occupational health can be compromised by activities at the Fermi site that encourage the growth of disease-causing microorganisms. Thermal discharges from Fermi into the circular water system and Lake Erie have the potential to increase the growth of thermophilic organisms. These microorganisms give rise to potentially serious human concerns, particularly at high exposure levels, unquote. While this statement references Fermi, it also applies to Data Specie reactor near Toledo. And this has a direct bearing on the toxic plume on Lake Erie that shut down the water intake at Toledo in 2014. At that time, I sent a letter to IJC quoting that statement that comes right from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I got no response. I wish that they would make some noise and bark a lot. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission states that all nuclear reactors are designed to and do emit radionuclides into the environment. In addition, there are emissions from operator error, degraded equipment, failed equipment, and accidents. The National Academies of Sciences has stated there is no threshold with regard to exposure to radionuclides, and that even at low levels, which they define as near 0 to 100 millisieverts, it can produce not only cancer, but broad spectrum illness, morbidity, and genetic mutation. So there is no safe level, and we have only the pretense and deception of safety. The IJC has been silent on Ontario Power Generation's plan to build a deep underground dump near the shore of Lake Huron. Again, we wish they'd bark. That's near Kincardine, and also the plan to transport 6,000 gallons of highly radioactive liquid nitric acid solution from Chalk River, Ontario to the Savannah River site, that's in South Carolina. Those two actions are dangerous, they're high risk, and with any kind of untoward event would pollute the Great Lakes and make it unsafe for humans to use permanently. So please, bark.
I would like to see a very strong response from the IJC, because you guys have credibility, you got credentials, you got research, you've done wonderful research. I'd like to see a strong response for the U.S. administration cutbacks of the Great Lakes funding and the cutbacks of the EPA. And I think it would carry a lot of weight if the Canadian colleagues join in that.
Right on.
Because it's all of our water, you know, it's international. So it may not do any good, but a loud bark, I thought, would be great. Now, I want to bring up an issue that maybe other people haven't covered so much. You know, I agree with all the other issues. But there's been a lot of press lately about the oil pipeline, Line 5, under the Mackinac Straits. Okay. Do you realize Line 5 also crosses the St. Mary's or St. Clair River near Marysville, along with Line 6B, a major tar sand oil pipeline. Now, we found out that there's perhaps we're not even sure how many crossings there are there, between 14 and 16 pipeline crossings. And we had experience with one issue from LP Plains out of Houston, Texas, who wanted to renew their permit for the pipeline crude oil built in 1914 to support the war effort by President Wilson. The role of the IJC could, or they withdrew the permit after much, they received so many comments that the company withdrew the permit. But the State Department, who has oversight over international crossings, was, ready to approve it. One day before the comments were due, we happened to send out an alert, and we got an extension, and sure enough, people responded. So that stopped it. But what I see happening is there's an expansion of these pipelines. We have the ET rover, which is on the ground right now, coming through Pinckney Recreation Area. I took pictures of old growth forest being wiped out. Okay, ET, Energy Transfer, should be familiar because that's the company that's put through the Dakota pipeline. Okay, so behind that, we have the proposal where DTE is a partner in the Nexus pipeline. So we've got these giant gas pipelines to get the fracking gas to market, mostly through Canada. So what could the IJC do? FERC would approve every pipeline, no doubt about it. State Department, I don't think, has the environmental creds to analyze this. So I was hoping that the IJC could bring together some advice for these people, if nothing else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm speaking for the coalition to oppose the expansion of U.S. Ecology, a grassroots organization formed to stop the massive expansion of toxic and frack waste into Detroit. I'm also speaking for the Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation, a nonprofit organization that began in struggle against Nestle. So the country has a big problem today with what to do with the waste generated from fracking. And unfortunately, Michigan has opened the state to much of that frack waste. And it's endangering the Great Lakes. To begin with, we have hazardous waste plants in the city of Detroit. The owner of U.S. Ecology's Georgia Street plant plans a 10-fold increase in the toxins it hauls in and treats here. Currently, they are allowed by government agencies to dump up to 300,000 gallons of this treated waste into the public sewers every day. If the expansion is approved, they will no doubt want a massive increase in the liquids the plant is allowed to dump into the sewers, which ends up in the Detroit River. We are opposed to the expansion of this waste plant and any toxins polluting the Detroit River and the Great Lakes. U.S. Ecology hazardous waste plants also have a history of accepting and treating radioactive waste from fracking and brine from oil and gas operations. Our concern is that this waste will leave a radioactive footprint in Detroit and the Detroit River.
We got spies.
So of course, we're opposed to any radioactive waste treated in Detroit, which could end up in the river via the public sewer system. Third, EPA in Region 5, which covers several states, monitors 1,800 underground injection disposal wells for toxic waste. That's several states. Well, 1,700 of the 1,800 of these injection wells are in Michigan. Underground permanent storage of toxic waste in Michigan is latent but a very real potential threat to the Great Lakes. Injection wells do leak, and research supports that they also cause earthquakes. The last point I want to make is that on the one hand, the Great Lakes are endangered by this toxic waste, and on the other hand, the lakes are being drained for commercial interests. Privatization of the Great Lakes water basin for commercial use provides profit for a few and a heavy burden on the residents. As was mentioned earlier, over 80,000 Detroiters have had their water shut off in recent years. Meanwhile, Nestle Corporation is asking the Michigan DEQ to allow them to take 210 million gallons a year from a single well in Evert for a $200 annual fee. We believe that water must be part of the commons, must be accessible to all equally, and must be covered by the public trust doctrine at the state level. Thank you for holding this forum and for providing us a place to speak our concerns.
Chemical pollution of the Great Lakes, basically by water infiltration, has been going on for years. We've been deforesting this country since about the 1600s type of thing. Those trees were doing a really good job of stopping that pollution from going into the Great Lakes. Trees act as a filter. There's a thing called phytoremediation, which is using plants for pollution control. A subset of that is dendroremediation, where you can plant trees, willows, cottonwoods in polluted brownfield sites, and they will suck up the toxins. They will either store them in the trunk, they will exhale them through the leaves, or there will be microbiological action at the root level where those substances become neutral. We've been deforesting, and we have to start to think of a way to stop this, and my belief is forestation. So on page 58 of your manual, you talk about water infiltration. So I'm suggesting that the IJC actually looks at forestation again. And of course, we know that the GLRI funding is going to be dropping off, and the president is saying that the great 8 states and 2 provinces are going to have to pay for this in the future. But my belief is we should reforest. Thank you.